Hey, everybody. Welcome. Good to be here with you all tonight. Happy New Year. It is 2024, and we are going to hit the ground running. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's have yet another late night conversation. I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. Let's do it.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Now, the way we do things, for those of you who may not be familiar, is I give my opening remarks, and then from there, we do a roll call. And then from there, I answer your questions for the rest of the night. So if there's something you'd like me to talk about in the second half of our show, send me a Rumble rant, send me a Rockfin tip, send me a YouTube super chat. I'm on all three platforms. They all seem to be working tonight. Had a little trouble with Rumble a few nights ago, but it's working just fine. I'm on the Rockfin. I'm on Rumble. I'm on YouTube, and we're doing great. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. And if you want me to hit something in the second half of our show, boom, just send me a super chat. Quick announcements. I am reminding everybody that coming up February 17th is a very, very important anti-war protest in Washington, D.C. called Rage Against the War Machine 2. Defeat the Deep State. We at the Center for Political Innovation, we are supporting that. That's very important. And if you're a CPI member, please remember that this weekend, on Sunday, January 7th, we are calling for national protests around the country, small demonstrations about keeping the USA out of Yemen. And that's really important. So this is Defeat the Deep State. That's coming up in Washington, D.C. on February 17th. Be at the Lincoln Memorial. We'll be there as CPI in big numbers. We're having a meetup afterwards. It's going to be really, really awesome. Defeat the Deep State, Lincoln Memorial, Washington, D.C. That's coming up February 17th. And we have a new call out that we just published on our website that we are calling on people to have small protests around the country, to oppose any U.S. military intervention in Yemen. All eyes are on Yemen, where the Houthis are the heroes of the world for stopping the boats. The USA has already attacked a few Yemeni ships, and it looks like the USA and Britain could be moving into Yemen at any time. We want to show our solidarity and say that real America stands with Yemen. We're going to be out in the streets on Sunday, January 7th. That's going to be important. We need to show solidarity with Yemen, condemn Israel's crimes, hands off Yemen. Hands off Yemen. Real America stands with Yemen. So those are my two big announcements. Happy New Year to everybody. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. If you got anything you want me to answer in the second half of the show, send your questions in. Rumble rants, Rockfin tips, super chats. That's the way we do it in the second half of the show. Keep your hands and arms inside the carpet at all times, and away we go. So tonight we're talking about the most brave and heroic group of musicians ever to have existed. The power structure, the man. That's what rock musicians call it. The man. I think that was used by the black community at one point, but it was appropriated by the 60s counterculture. They talk about the man. The government, the FBI, the police, the military, the wealthy corporations, the big record companies, the man. Had it stuck to him last night on national television. the man, all the forces of wealth and power and authoritarianism in America. They got a kick in the face because Green Day, the rock and roll band of the 1980s, changed the lyrics to one of their songs to have a subtle dig at Donald Trump in it. And everyone is just in awe of their bravery, of their heroism. Right? Donald Trump is the president after all. Oh, wait, he's not. Well, Donald Trump is a leading candidate for president. Oh, wait, he's being banned from the ballot in a bunch of different states. Well, Donald Trump is the head of the criminal justice system right now. Oh, wait, he's being indicted by the criminal justice system. He's actually a defendant. He's facing criminal charges and could go to prison. Well, regardless, the point is Green Day stuck it to the man. The man hid under his desk in shame. Because when they performed their song, their hit song from 2004, American Idiot, they changed the lyrics on national television. And instead of saying, I'm not a part of a redneck agenda, I'm not a part of a redneck agenda. Instead of saying that, what did they say? They said, I'm not a part of a MAGA agenda. They nailed it. They nailed it. This was the most epic revolutionary moment in the history of American television. First, there was that great wardrobe malfunction at the Super Bowl a few years ago. And then there was Sinead O'Connor ripping up a picture of the Pope. And now there is Green Day's epic, heroic, bold statement, sticking it to the man. The man has had it stuck to him. Why, the man is going to be cleaning his shirt to try and get it off for weeks, for years, for months. It's going to take months for the man to launder his shirt and get everything that they stuck to him off of it. They stuck it to the man. They stuck it to the man like a yard of chewing gum. They changed the lyrics to their song. Instead of simply condemning a redneck agenda, they condemned a MAGA agenda. And we are all in awe of their epic, heroic stance. It was a great breakthrough for the proletariat. Workers and peasants across the world are emboldened to seize control of their factories. Soon, worker cooperatives will be emerging to make sure that we stop having stuff and that everyone is poorer to save Mother Earth. Transgender bathrooms are being created in Saudi Arabia. This is a great moment for the progressive movement. We are all in awe of what they accomplished. The revolution is now many light years closer. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. Yes, JT24 says Joe Sims is still shaken by it. I bet Joe Sims was watching. Joe Sims, the chair of the Communist Party, was watching. And he heard them say that. And he muted the TV for a second and broke down in tears. He was just so overjoyed. Oh, it was a great moment. He said, Rosanna, Green Day, they stuck it to Donald Trump on the TV. Oh, man, it was something. But anyway, I digress. You know, this is all over the social media today, right? Everyone's making fun of how pathetic this thing was. And, you know, the Trump sphere is just laughing about it, right? They're having a field day with this. The Trump people are tweeting about this more than the anti-Trump people are. I feel like the anti-Trump people are a little bit embarrassed, right? The anti-Trump people, they wanted this to be a win for them, but they were just a little bit embarrassed. They're like, okay, yeah, all right, yeah. Green Day's on our team. Yep. They're good progressives too, just like the Department of Justice, just like the mainstream media, just like CNN, just like half of Fox News. Yeah, they're on our team, whatever. And it's the MAGA people that are having a field day with this. They are loving this. They are rolling on the floor, making fun of this. This is like a win for MAGA. I feel like in a weird way, the Trump movement actually got a boost here because, Green Day tried to be epic and punk, and they did something that embarrassed the progressive movement more or less. So see, I wasn't even watching last night. Beyonce had a wardrobe malfunction too. Well, there you go. What a night. But this is amusing to me because it's amusing on a number of levels. See, I remember when the song American Idiot came out. I remember when that song came out. The political atmosphere was very, very different in those days. So I looked it up. I didn't hear the song American Idiot until at least 2005. But the song, I didn't listen to popular music. My parents, we didn't have the radio on. It was NPR if we had the radio on. So I did not hear that song when it came out. But the song American Idiot came out like days before the 2004 election, right? The 2004 election was like November 2nd, November 1st, something like that, 2004. The song American Idiot came out September 21st, 2004. It's like literally days before John Kerry and George W. Bush faced off at the polls. And that election was pretty intense. I was in high school, and George W. Bush was taking the country in a very scary authoritarian direction, and mainstream media was supporting him. Basically, what the Democrats are now, how they're the war party, and if you better agree with them or you're a bad person, and and they're taking away our rights, and they're advocating censorship, and that what the Democrats are now is what the Republicans were back then. The Republicans were the mainstream imperialist party. They were the hardline party of American imperialism. And George W. Bush, in the aftermath of 9/11, he said, you're either with us or against us. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. And then from there, George W. Bush, passed the Patriot Act, huge attack on our civil liberties. And then from there, he made up that somehow Iraq was responsible for 9/11, which was absolutely ridiculous. Even if you buy the official story of 9/11, 100%, there's no way Saddam Hussein had anything to do with it. He invaded Iraq, and the whole, most of NATO except for Britain were against it. France and Germany were against it. The whole world was saying, the United States, you can't invade Iraq. And the United States invaded Iraq anyway. And killed hundreds of thousands of people. And the 2004 election was pretty contentious. September of 2004, I remember I was in Ohio, and I grew up near a university called Kent State University. And I remember I went to Kent State University, and I was in an auditorium at Kent State University to see Michael Moore. Do you guys remember Michael Moore? He had better days. Michael Moore had made the movie... He had made the movie Fahrenheit 9/11, and he had made the movie that had won the Oscars, Bowling for Columbine. And Michael Moore went on this speaking tour urging leftists not to vote for Ralph Nader and not to vote for the Green Party, but instead to vote for John Kerry. And he went around the country, and we went to a rally at Kent State University. The whole auditorium was full. The Green Party was there, and the International Socialist Organization, the ISO, was there, and the RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party, was there. They were all selling their newspapers, and then on top of that, you had you had labor unions in big numbers and LGBT, and it was this huge auditorium of people that were just fired up against Bush. They wanted to get rid of Bush, but they were really mad at the direction that capitalism was going at the time, toward war and a low-wage police state. And they were mad about the decline in living standards, and they were mad about the suppression of civil liberties, and they were mad about the suppression of free speech, and the idea that if you disagreed with the war, you were a traitor and should be arrested, which was like frequently being said on TV at the time. This rally that happened, it looked like a rally against Bush, but I was there, as a 15-year-old kid. And I mean, my parents were Democrats. They were supporters of the Democrats in that election, but they were not comfortable with how far left the crowd was. I mean, that crowd was, Michael Moore was praising Cuba in his speech. And Michael Moore was, critical of capitalism, and the people in the audience were, I mean, it was a far left gathering, but Michael Moore was very much playing the sheepdog. Was playing the sheepdog, and getting everyone to vote for the Democrats. But it was something else. It was something else. And it was in that atmosphere, September, like days before the John Kerry, George Bush election, that this song, American Idiot, came out. And I didn't hear it until at least a year later. I remember I was in the high school drama club, and while we were changing, people had, you remember these things called CDs? There were these things called CDs. I'm an old man now. I'm 36, so I can talk about back in the day. But as we were changing for our high school drama club, practice or whatever, people had CDs, and I remember hearing American Idiot, and it put a grin on my face. And there was Rock the Vote was happening. There were all these, punk rock artists that were going around urging young people to go out and vote. And they were saying that there might, the Democrats were trying to get young people out to vote by saying that there would be a draft. If George W. Bush was reelected, there might be a military draft. They had shirts that said "Vote or Die," vote or die. And the Democrats, in areas where the Democrats had a stronghold, like, New York City, and in California, the Democrats were revving up their base. And it was a weird thing because there was like two campaigns that year. There was the Green Day campaign, the Michael Moore campaign, and then there was the actual John Kerry campaign. And I noticed this at the time, and I was furious about it because the way Michael Moore was talking, praising Cuba, calling for guaranteed health care, saying the USA had no right to invade Iraq and needed to leave Iraq immediately, and saying that the Iraqis were the new American revolutionaries. They were fighting against the empire, the occupier. That was where most people that were against George W. Bush were at. They were against the American establishment. But that's not how John Kerry spoke. John Kerry was the candidate. And John Kerry was saying things like he said that he was going to send more troops to Iraq. That was one part of John Kerry's campaign message, was he was going to send more troops to Iraq. He said, well, when you invade a country, it's the Pottery Barn rule. You break it, you fix it. And everyone made fun of John Kerry because, of course, that's not the rule at Pottery Barn. You break it, you fix it. No. If you go to the Pottery Barn, they do not give you glue and hot glue and ceramic glue and have you put the pieces of the pot back together. No, the rule at the Pottery Barn is you break it, you buy it. You break it and it's yours, not you break it, you fix it. And John Kerry was this, this typical New England liberal who came out there. Yes, I want to send more troops to Iraq. Even though I was against invading Iraq, I want to send more troops to Iraq. And most of the people that were voting for John Kerry, the overwhelming majority of them were voting for him because he was against the war. But yet John Kerry's campaign turned into a gigantic military rally. They made a documentary film all about how John Kerry was a war hero for fighting in Vietnam. John Kerry had come back from Vietnam and been an anti-war activist, and they did everything they could to cover that up. And John Kerry actually began his presidential campaign, speech, or his speech at the Democratic National Convention. He went up to the podium, and I remember this, his speech accepting the nomination of the Democratic Party. The Democratic National Convention, he got up there and he said, John Kerry reporting for duty, and it was like John Kerry's whole campaign was some kind of weird psychological operation aimed at people who wanted to vote for him, trying to get them to support a war that they were all voting for him because they were against, trying to get them to support suppression of civil liberties that they were all voting for. I mean, it was weird. It was very, very weird. And at the same time that you had the actual John Kerry campaign, which was nothing but supporting militarism, calling for more troops, calling for political repression, you had this other John Kerry campaign that included American Idiot and Michael Moore and Rock the Vote and Vote or Die and Tom Morello, and it was weird. And the rallies were just as big. You know, Michael Moore's crowds were just as big as John Kerry's crowds. And it was a weird, weird time. It was a very, very weird time. And the Republicans won that election. They won. It was close. It was a very close vote, but they won, and they won on the basis of the fact that that in a number of states, gay marriage was on the ballot, right? And I remember this. I was in Ohio at the time, and there were many evangelical conservatives who had questions about Bush, had questions about the war in Iraq, and might not have gone to vote, especially among the African American and Latino community. Many of the non-white evangelical Christians were not excited about Bush because they were economically suffering, because they had relatives in the military, because they had more of an anti-establishment feeling. And there were many, many African American conservatives and evangelical Christians that didn't want to go out to vote. So what the Republicans did is, in a number of key states, they put constitutional amendments to ban gay marriage on the ballot, and many evangelical conservatives who would have stayed home, who were not excited about Bush, went to the ballot and voted for Bush. And even today, people speculate that in Ohio, in my home state, it could have been rigged. It could have been a rigged election because of the fact that in the Democratic Party districts, there were barely any voting machines, and in the conservative areas like my hometown, there were more voting machines. There were plenty of voting machines, and people speculated about the really long lines at Oberlin College and all of that. But regardless, George W. Bush won that election. And the song "American Idiot," which we heard on national television last night, it was a rant against conservatives. Right? It was a rant against the kind of know nothing. If you don't like it here in this country, why don't you move to another country? I support President Bush because I'm not a terrorist who hates America. That was kind of the stereotype of a conservative during those years, right? Conservatives were pro-gun, pro-military, and they hated Muslims. And if you didn't support George W. Bush and you didn't support the invasion of Iraq, they thought you should move to another country. Right. And that was kind of the stereotype. And, what the election map, and there was that infamous map that they wanted to show of the districts in America. The bulk of the geographic territory of the United States was dominated by people who had more or less that perspective. That was a lot of dudes back then. And it certainly was. I lived in a town full of them, but that was certainly the perspective of most of the geographic population of the United States. Now, that wasn't the the country was divided about 50-50 in terms of the population overall. It was about 50-50. But in terms of geographic population, it was pretty solid that, in smaller towns, rural areas, the South, that was the viewpoint. And so the song "American Idiot" that Green Day did, that song was basically, the line about, I'm not a part of a redneck agenda. That was the line, that they changed to be, I'm not a part of a MAGA agenda. That line was a dig at the evangelical conservatism and the celebrated ignorance, I guess you could say, of much of the George W. Bush base. Right. That's what that was a dig at. And it was an expression of alienation on the part of younger intellectuals, younger people who felt that they were well read, they were bookish, they knew, they did their research. They knew that Saddam Hussein was not in bed with Osama bin Laden. They knew that, weapons of mass destruction had never been found. It was an expression of their alienation, which I think that's actually in the song. There's a line about something alienation, right? There's a line about alienation, and it was an expression of nonconformity, right? And critiquing people in U.S. society whose minds are, controlled by the mainstream media, dominated by mainstream media discourse. And because of that, they're blindly following war and imperialism and stuff. And it was kind of celebrating the anti-intellectual, critiquing or exposing or lamenting the anti-Americanism of American culture, or the anti-intellectualism of American culture. That's what that song was. And at the time that I heard it, it was actually kind of refreshing. And what I think was interesting was that, I always tell people that the Bush administration, that was the last hurrah of what we call the late Cold War normal in American politics, where the Republicans were the hard right wing, and they had this kind of weird pseudo working class populism, and the Democrats were the dissidents. They were the people that were like, maybe, but not so much. They were critical of what the Republicans had to say. They weren't fully on board with military interventions. They weren't fully on board with free market neoliberal economics. And the Republicans were the hardliners. The Democrats were the not so sure questioners, and that was the setup in American politics. And the Bush years, that was the very last hurrah of that. And American Idiot was a song that was more or less bemoaning the fact that George W. Bush had the support in order to do the things that he did that were horrendous from a section of the population that didn't want to know and was mesmerized by mass media. And, at the time I heard the song, I found it to be very refreshing, very reassuring. I will say, there's a huge amount of anti-populism in that, though. There's a huge amount of thinking of the people as the enemy. There's a huge amount of thinking of yourself as the good American in an evil country. There's a huge amount of liberal self-righteousness in that song. And it doesn't fit the direction that American politics is moving in at all. And it certainly doesn't fit, the politics. You're on the list. It certainly doesn't fit the politics of, what we, what the left historically has come to stand for, but it fits the politics of the late Cold War normal, right? That's the Weathermen, right? The Weather Underground. They're the good Americans and an evil Nazi society that are proving their moral by blowing things up. That's the hippies, right? The flower children who just want love in a society that's so violent and cruel and conforming, right? I mean, it's when leftism becomes the politics of the nonconformist. Leftism becomes the politics of the person with a conscience and a soul who just can't fit into this cold, authoritarian, military, Cold War conformity, right? It's very much 1960s bohemian counterculture politics. That's very, very much what American Idiot reflects. And the song came out and it was kind of a hit. And it's interesting. Peter Coffin has a take on it, which I thought is very good. It's a little bit different than mine, right? I don't think we disagree with each other. We don't disagree with each other. But, there's some overlap, but he had a different reaction to this whole thing than I have. But I guess when I see the whole controversy with Green Day, and I see, conservatives, making fun of how lame this is, and when I see, liberals, they're not even thrilled about it, right? Maybe if Bush was, or maybe if Trump was still president, they'd be excited about it. I see the change in American politics. And I see how even that line, I'm not a part of a redneck agenda, even that line has a different meaning. What is a redneck agenda? I mean, what is a redneck to begin with? The term redneck generally is understood to be a derogatory term for a white person who engages in farm labor because they get sunburned on the back of their neck. It was a term for Irish. Irish folks are very light-skinned, and we burn easily. And when Irish laborers came to the United States, they were considered to be, they weren't property owners. They were indentured servants or very poor, and they were working out in the fields, and they got red necks from the sunburns from working out in the fields. Well, and I heard in the Caribbean too, there was a term, they used the term red legs. Red legs was the word used for white laborers, or, it basically, the term redneck basically means white trash. Means you're white, but you're not a wealthy person. You're white, but you're not a property owner. You're white, but you are working class and poor and low income and undesirable. You're not dignified, right? The WASP, the dignified WASP, carries his cane and his monocle, and he says, "Oh, look, we've got ourselves some rednecks here. Some rednecks here. They're going to the NASCAR game to watch the cars go round and round while they tend to their meth labs." Yes, I mean, redneck is a derogatory term. But then there's an interesting interpretation. Apparently, the term goes back to West Virginia. And some people say the term redneck actually started as a vulgar term for labor unionists. Apparently, the miners' union, when it was first getting started in the late 1800s among coal miners, they wore red scarves around their necks to symbolize their membership in the union. And the wealthy coal miners and the coal owners hated the labor unionists, and they thought they were a bunch of rabble. They thought they were a bunch of dangerous people. And so they referred to the labor union members, miners that were members of the labor union. They called them rednecks because of the red scarves they wore around their necks to symbolize they were members of the labor union. I think that's very cool, right? So maybe redneck, if you really look at the history, it actually refers to something kind of communist. Because, if a labor union in the 1800s, they're all wearing bright red scarves, we know how the labor unions got started. They were started by people who thought that the banks and the factories and the industries should be owned by the workers. So maybe the term redneck has a labor, a Marxist history connotation. But we all know that nowadays the term redneck is associated with, the culture of low-income white people, be they Appalachian, be they Southern, be they rural. It is associated with non-urban and non-suburban, white people, right? White people who live in trailer parks, white people who live in farming areas, white people who've been in prison, white people who've been in the military, white people that are not part of the professional managerial class, non-middle class, non-professional whites. That is what the term generally means. And during the Bush years, the bulk of those folks were voting for George W. Bush. And the bulk of the people that were against the war, were not, were not of that demographic. They were either, urban middle class liberals, or they were black and brown or Latino, or Asian or Arab or something like that. And that was the demographic. And so when Green Day was on there saying, "I'm not a part of a redneck agenda," they were saying, "I'm not blindly conforming to the military. I'm not an evangelical Christian conservative. I'm not supporting the war in Iraq." When they say, "I'm not a part of a MAGA agenda," the MAGA crowd, despite the fact that they are, full of negative, awful ideas, there's plenty of delusional, horrible ideas, in the MAGA camp. And thank you for all the super chats that are coming in. I'm going to make a point of answering all of them. And thank you. I do appreciate it. You guys are asking a lot of questions here. So that's good. Regardless, people in the MAGA movement are clearly the ones that are at odds with the establishment, just like American Idiot and Green Day were back in 2004, right? The MAGA, Trump is indicted. He's running for president, and he's indicted in a number of states. He's being banned from the ballot in a number of states. He's the only president in American history to have been impeached twice in his presidency. Even his own party seems to be against him at this point. The leadership of it, at least. And Donald Trump was an awful president. He murdered Qasem Soleimani. He moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. He deregulated Wall Street. He said horrible things. He said a lot of horrible things. I mean, in terms of doing horrible things, he didn't do very many horrible things other than murdering Qasem Soleimani, escalating attacks on Venezuela. I mean, you can list horrible things that he did, but most of the things that people don't like Donald Trump for doing are things he said, not things he did, right? If Donald Trump carried out everything he said, he would be an awful man. But most of the things that people think of when they think of Donald Trump and don't like him are things that he said, not things that he did. And that's a fair point that needs to be made, right? Biden has done far more reprehensible things than Trump did, but Trump said plenty of reprehensible things, and Biden hasn't, right? Biden tends to use the correct words and be polite while he does the reprehensible things. Donald Trump, on the other hand, he did some reprehensible things like escalating, and attacking Iran, like, attacks on Venezuela. But in terms of actual crimes, I mean, his presidency was somewhat mild. He deregulated Wall Street a little bit. He rolled back some environmental protections. He engaged in endless amounts of political theater and publicity stunts to troll the media and get attention for himself. He said a lot of reprehensible things, but he honestly didn't do that much. And from the head of U.S. imperialism, that's kind of a good thing. The less they get done, the better, right? It is not our duty as anti-imperialists to want the head of U.S. imperialism to be a competent, good guy. That's not our job, right? Now maybe, if you have like an FDR, like a Bonapartist who's entering a strategic alliance with the working class, that's a different situation. Or a Lincoln, for example, who's entering a strategic alliance with the proletariat to defeat slavery. Yeah, you want Lincoln to be a good guy. You want Roosevelt to be a good guy. But in normal circumstances, outside of a semi-revolutionary upsurge, aside from a Bonapartist coalition, for the most part, we want the head of U.S. imperialism to be an idiot. We want the head of U.S. imperialism to not get a lot done. We want the head of U.S. imperialism to be incompetent, because if they're competent, they will drive down our living standards. They'll take us into more wars. The agenda that they would normally be carrying out is an agenda that is to our detriment. I mean, that's something we should realize, right? We don't want the head of American imperialism to be a smart guy, because that would lead to people around the world having their lives and jobs and living standards go down. That would lead to our wages and conditions going down. That would lead to a heavy-handed political repression, right? Having a smart head of American imperialism is generally not good for the working class. Again, there are rare circumstances where you have a class collaborationist united front. You have, a Lincoln situation or a Roosevelt situation. But aside from that, unless you're in some kind of period of great revolutionary upsurge, you really don't want the head of U.S. imperialism to be a smart guy. You really don't. And a lot of the arguments against Bush, even then, right, as much as we were opposed to what Bush was doing with the war in Iraq, we were opposed to him attacking on civil liberties. One of the big arguments against Bush was that he outed a CIA agent. You remember this? That was one of the big crimes of the Bush administrations. Valerie Plame was a woman who was going around opposing the war in Iraq. And so Dick Cheney, the vice president, revealed to the public that she was a CIA agent. So what? I don't know. I mean, we want every CIA agent to have their identity revealed. That's what we want, right? That's what we want. We want every CIA agent's name to be revealed, right? I mean, we don't, want the American intelligence agencies to be able to covertly operate and carry out their agenda. So, Dick Cheney revealing the identity of a CIA agent, right? We have no loyalty to the imperialist state. That's not a crime as far as we are concerned. In the 2004 election, it was a weird moment, but it was like an odd punch in the mouth for the working class. It really was. It was an odd punch in the mouth. And it was like, on the one hand, they did this weird psychological operation where they got the black community and the labor unions and the bulk of the population that were against the war to go and vote for a guy who was for the war, who did not hear their concerns, who didn't agree with them. And then on top of that, they lost. And then they got told that the Democratic Party was out of touch. And the 2004 election was very demoralizing. It was very, very demoralizing for many people. The black community was deeply demoralized. The labor movement was very demoralized. The anti-war movement was very, very demoralized. Many people in this country who wanted to do good things were very demoralized by that election. And then within a year, things snapped. And about the time that I first heard the song American Idiot, things snapped. And suddenly, everyone was criticizing George W. Bush, but it had a fake character to it. And in 2006, the Democrats took back control of the U.S. Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. But it had a very fake character to it. One of the things was that the Republicans had made a deal that a lot of American ports would do business with a company from Dubai. And the Democrats said that Dubai was like a country that potentially had ties to Al Qaeda because it was a Middle Eastern country or something. And so the Democrats were like, we're calling out the Republicans for making a deal with Dubai. That was weird. That was a very, very weird thing. And all of a sudden they were saying that that airport security was ineffective. I remember that. And that was like nobody who was part of the anti-Bush, anti-war movement was thinking, oh yeah, the airport security, they just don't search people well enough at the airports. And what was happening was the ruling class, mainstream media, was suddenly shifting the tone because the Bush administration had failed. And there were things happening beneath the surface. And I want to tell you, before we get to Peter, one of the most important developments that happened in the immediate aftermath of that 2004 election, around the time that American Idiot came out, was the Millions More March. All right, so the Million Man March happened in 1995. That was a really important moment where Minister Louis Farrakhan, a black minister, leader of the Nation of Islam, he rallied. It looks like 1 million men. It was hundreds of thousands if it wasn't 1 million. Many people say it was 1 million to march. And it started out, it was going to be like a very much a Black Power march. And it was a very controversial thing. Minister Louis Farrakhan, was pro-Palestine and friendly to Cuba and was an anti-imperialist in many ways. And, Bill Clinton made a point of not being there in Washington, D.C. and giving no comment on the march. This Black Power march happened in Washington, D.C. At the last minute, they changed the tone of the rally to focus on the need for black men to be responsible fathers. They call it Holy Day of Atonement. And they made it not have a tone of attacking the American establishment. They made it a little more like black men need to be more responsible or something. They changed the tone of it at the last minute as kind of a compromise so that it didn't face government repression. There was a huge rally in 1995. In the middle of the time that mass incarceration was rising across the United States, there was a huge Black Power rally in Washington, D.C. The Million Man March was a historic moment, 1995. 10 years after the Million Man March, 10 years later, they had the Millions More March. And the Millions More March, the 10-year anniversary of the Million Man March, that happened 2005, the year after George W. Bush was reelected, the year after American Idiot came out. And I remember the Millions More March. I didn't go. I watched it on C-SPAN. I went to the computer lab at my college and at my high school, I put my headphones on and I listened to the Millions More March. And the Millions More March, that was a communist rally. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it whatever you want. The Millions More March was, I mean, it was amazing. The Millions More March, I mean, they had, the Speaker of the Cuban Parliament addressed it. Minister Louis Farrakhan quoted from Mao's Little Red Book in his sermon, in his big speech. They had great leaders of the Black community, and they listed Che Guevara as a leader of the Black community. I always thought of Che Guevara as Latino. I never thought of him as Black, but hey, they had his face on the screen. Minister Louis Farrakhan, in his big speech, he said that the American government needs to learn from Cuba, which is a country that cares about its poor. He hailed Hugo Chavez as a great leader in South America, and talked about how Cuba wanted to send English-speaking doctors after Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina had just happened. Thousands of Black Americans in New Orleans left on their rooftops to die, and Minister Louis Farrakhan organized this. It was at least 500,000 people were there. This mega anti-imperialist rally that happened on the National Mall. And they were, supporting Cuba. He was talking about China. The Belt and Road of China had just gotten going. And he was praising China's role in Africa. And he said, Americans, American government, you say you care about Black people in Africa. Why don't you go build a railroad like China's doing? Why don't you go build a power plant? He was defending China. And, 500,000 Black people were on the National Mall applauding and supporting, a rally that was basically cheering for the Palestinians, that was cheering for the global anti-imperialist movement. That was huge. After Bush was reelected, the political establishment in America started kind of reshuffling things to change the messaging. To suddenly Bush was no good, and they were, setting the stage for Obama to come in on his white horse and save the day. But another thing I want to point out is that American Idiot, like I said, it's very anti-populist. And there's another song that came out during the same time. And it's called The Idiots Are Taking Over. And it's an anti-Bush song. It's an anti-Republican, but it's very, very Malthusian. And it's very, very anti-working class. I've got the lyrics. I can't play it because somebody owns the rights to it. But I'll just read you some of the lyrics of The Idiots Are Taking Over. And I remember I liked it at the time that I heard it. I liked it. But the lyrics to this anti-Bush song from 2003, they're actually very, very dangerous, right? Right? Yeah, I mean, Mensa membership conceding. Tell me why and how are all the stupid people breeding? Industrial revolution has flipped the bitch on evolution. The benevolent and wise are being thwarted and ostracized. What a bummer. The world keeps getting dumber. There's no point for democracy when ignorance is celebrated. Political scientists get the same vote as some Arkansas inbred. Majority rule doesn't work in mental institutions. What are we left with? A nation of God-fearing pregnant nationalists who feel it's their duty to populate the homeland. I mean, this is really vile anti-working class hate. You listen to that song, it's basically saying that people in red states are subhuman, that people in red states, people that are conservative, are inferior, subhuman human beings who shouldn't be allowed to procreate. And the problem is that they breed too much, and there's too many of them. It sounds like, at the time I heard it, I was just like, yeah, I don't like conservatives. But you listen to it, it's actually a very anti-human song. It is outright fascist, right? It is an attack on the bulk of the working class and saying that because they are conservative, their conservatism is rooted in some kind of genetic inferiority, and they should not be able to procreate. And it's vile anti-human propaganda. Vile. It's an ugly song. You were absolutely right. It's a very ugly song. And it's nothing socialist about it. Socialism is a populist movement. Socialism is about mobilizing the bulk of the population, the working class, to seize control of the means of production. But in the Cold War years, when the American aristocracy of labor was still better, the politics were all confused. But that song, American Idiot isn't that bad. But No FX, the idiots are taking over, is just vile. It is saying that the working class are the enemy. And that's now what the woke folks believe, right? I mean, they believe it much more blatantly now. Back in those days, left, what passed for left, Michael Moore and all of that, it at least had some attachment to socialism and to genuine communism. But this, this stuff, that the working class or the enemy, that was already there. It was the beginning. But I also want to talk about how, and again, I don't blame Green Day for this, and forgive me. I just, a lot of this stuff. Look, I remember, I grew up in a rural town. The nearest Hot Topic was like an hour and a half or 2 hour drive, away from where I lived. And, this suburban mall culture, right? This was a lot of this stuff, Green Day, No FX, Anti-Flag, this like protest punk. That stuff was very much a suburban kind of phenomenon. It was more people who lived in suburbs around major cities. They didn't live in the major cities. They were like the teenagers of the suburbs, right? They weren't in Cleveland. Cleveland was an urban city, but they lived in Westlake, or they lived in Beechwood or whatever, and they went to the urban mall and they listened. Their parents were all Republicans and Bush supporters, but they were jamming to punk rock protest songs that were against Bush. It was like those suburban teenagers. A lot of that punk rock stuff was suburban teenager, the 90s, the late 90s, early 2000s, you want to call it late, post-punk or whatever you want to call it, right? A lot of that, the cultural milieu that produced American Idiot, that was a very suburban thing. It was suburban upper middle class teenagers who were, into like edgy left-wing politics, who smoked weed and went to rock concerts and, didn't like their Republican parents and, wanted to do creative art or something like that, thought they were nonconformists, right? That was your typical, Green Day fan. That was your typical, attender of these kinds of concerts. But there's another trend that sprung up during this time around the same kind of phenomenon, and that's what they called emo music, right? And if you guys remember emo music was particularly vile. It was suicide porn. So many songs glorifying suicide, so many songs fixating and repeating the thoughts of a suicidal person. And many, it was, you listened to, was it Blink 182 and a lot of them. There were so many among these same bands that were singing songs about the idiots are taking over and we don't want to be conservatives. We don't want to be part of a redneck agenda or whatever. There were many songs about suicide and about self-mutilation and about, kind of, I wouldn't say glorifying, but highlighting the emotions and the thoughts that people who engage in self-harming behavior or suicide behavior engage in. And I must say, when I read the lyrics to The Idiots Are Taking Over and how they're basically saying that certain people shouldn't be allowed to breed and blaming overpopulation and, portraying humanity as the enemy, I see a connection there, right? Look, Marx was very opposed to Malthusianism. You cannot believe in overpopulation and be a Marxist. You cannot. The two things don't go together. Malthusianism says that the problems of capitalism are due to too many useless eaters, too many people. Marxism says the problems of capitalism are due to the irrationality of production organized for profit, and that human labor is the source of all wealth, and that more people means more wealth, and more human beings means that we can come together and create more wealth, and that human creativity is beautiful, and that human beings have this unique relationship with nature. So a lot of this, American idiot punk rock stuff, I see the beginning, I guess, of some of the negative trends that we see with the woke left. But I also see a different trend, and I'm not surprised that Green Day took their jab at Trump. I'm not surprised by that at all. I mean, I'm not surprised. And I'm also not surprised that, this has emboldened the Trump people, right? They love it because, right, it shows that these mainstream television is against them. And I've got some other thoughts on that. But now Peter Coffin had a very different, I shouldn't say different. He had a different angle on this. I think there's plenty of overlap here. I love Peter Coffin. I love his work. We're going to watch Peter's video now, and react to it here in little parts. This is great. Peter is doing a lot of really great videos. If you're not subscribed to Peter's channel, make sure you go subscribe. Peter is doing great work, and this is his take on the whole Green Day controversy.
Peter Coffin, and I can't help but be an American idiot. Gonna employ some cutting so that happens quicker than it happened. So happy New Year, everybody. It's 2024. I think New Year's Rockin' Eve, Ryan Seacrest's thing, used to be Dick Clark's thing, Happy New Year and all that. Green Day was on and did American Idiot, because why wouldn't they? American Idiot is a great song. And rather than get myself a nice copyright claim to deal with for the next 30 days, I decided, hey, I'll just summarize it for you real quick. Instead of saying I'm not a part of the redneck agenda, Billy Joe Armstrong said, I'm not a part of the MAGA agenda. And oh my lordy lord, that made some folks mad. It's all over social media this morning, guys. It's all Green Day all the time. Now, I wanted to talk about this because I kind of hate partisanship. What we have here is Green Day ultimately alienating a large part of the population they're allegedly singing about making the world better for. But I'm not calling out Green Day here because I think that's stupid. In fact, all the people calling out Green Day, they're people who are acting like they didn't know what Green Day was about. Like when American Idiot first came out, it was kind of a response to 9/11, particularly to the Bush administration and the 2003 war in Iraq. Like they went from being kind of a punky alternative band in the 1990s to when they released this album being just a really blatantly anti-conservative band. They were taking on the mantle of real punk, which is anti-establishment punk. And it gave them, I think, their biggest album they've ever made. Made a lot of money for a lot of people who aren't just in the band Green Day. Now, a lot of executives and shareholders also made a lot of money off of it. But this is Green Day's brand. If you know who Green Day is, there's very little chance that you think they're conservative.
Well, that's true. All right. And the whole punk scene, that's why a lot of people were talking about how, like, what they did, like, oh my God, Green Day took a dig at MAGA. Like, oh my God, God forbid. Green Day against Donald Trump. Who'd have ever guessed, what a punk band from the 80s and 90s is opposed to a Republican guy who used to be the president? Oh my God, and the fact that it's getting so much play on social media. Some record company or somebody is boosting this, right? And Peter gets into this too. The fandom cash flow going on here is, yeah. Anyway,
give you an example. The Citizen Free Press said Green Day singer Billy Joe Armstrong altered the song lyrics to American Idiot, confirming he's not a punk rocker, but just another tired, listless vessel for the corporate political agenda. Now, here's the point where all of the MAGA communists will say the revolutionary potential in America is in the MAGA. Therefore, we have to figure out how to talk to those people. You're not completely wrong. Like, the MAGA people are tired of the corporate political agenda, but they're only tired of it because they think of it as woke. The thing is, anti-woke is equally as corporate, as owned by the bourgeoisie as woke is. I wrote a book called Woke Ouroboros. It is criticizing.
Great book, by the way. We got it right here. Got it right here on our shelf. Great book. Great book.
The woke ideology as corporate and as a means to justify capitalism currently. Wokeness is exactly what these folks say it is. However, they're approaching it from a consumer standpoint. That is to say, there is a market of lifestyle choices one can make, and their choice is not woke. The opposite of woke. The other offering. What products are there for me, the anti-woke person?
Bingo. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just marketing and consumerism.
MAGA. MAGA must mean anti-corporate agenda, right? Well, no. MAGA doesn't even mean anti the agenda that MAGA hates, which is
so true. So true. And we're seeing that now with the Israel thing. I mean, you know, the MAGA movement wants to cancel all critics of Israel at this point, right? They're so against cancel culture, they got a canceled truck driving around Harvard canceling anyone who speaks out against Israel. You know, the MAGA movement, the MAGA movement is so against the status quo. It blames communism for all the problems and repeats just standard anti-communist, pro-free market, stuff everywhere.
The WEF finance capital agenda, which, yeah, I get why they hate it, but they don't understand it, and therefore they support it every single time. All they say is that we need different people in charge. We need the good elites, the ones that care about the thing that I care about. And that is the problem. They don't want to change how things work. They want to change who's in charge because they want them to have different priorities. And that is dumb. Just about as dumb as liberals who support the Green Day thing like this. My jaw dropped, and then I laughed, that laugh of, did I just hear that? Good for him and the band. I imagine the show producers and some sponsors weren't happy.
Well, that's hilarious, right? Being against Donald Trump is the most standard, that only puts you on the same team as like the U.S. Supreme Court and, the bulk of the U.S. Congress, the bulk of the Republican Party, the entire Democratic Party. I mean, it's like, oh, yeah. Green Day just got in huge trouble for that. Oh, my God. I mean, they'll never be on TV again. Oh, man.
Now, Fred very accidentally gets closer to what is correct while also being infuriating. First off, the popular ideology amongst the show producers and sponsors is definitely not MAGA. Right now, anyway. We'll see once they've handled this cycle of the imperialist crisis. But for now, they don't like that one. Like, it's astounding to me that Fred here thinks this is something that would bother the people who are in charge of most television today. But
absolutely. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, to be against MAGA right now. I mean, even when Trump was in office, it was pretty lame to be against MAGA. It was pretty lame to be against MAGA even then, right? But now Trump isn't even in office. He's trying to run for president again. He's probably not going to be able to because every state is going to ban him from the ballot. He's indicted. And I mean, it's like, oh, I'm against Donald Trump. Oh, boy. Are you against Kim Jong-un too? Wow. I bet you really oppose that Gaddafi, don't you? Oh, man. Oh, man. You're such a hero there. And I've ranted and raved. I cannot stand when people echo CNN, echo the mainstream of the American political establishment on foreign policy issues or on anything, and then think that they're somehow heroic. I cannot stand that. But anyway.
He says some, and that's kind of the key to how he's closer to right. There are factions in the ruling class, and ultimately they're kind of just at war over which ideology they think better justifies their rule in a manner that will keep the plebs' mouths shut and the buildings not burnt down. I'm sure that Green Day thinks that they're being anti-establishment. I mean, at this point, they've had nothing but reinforcement for decades on that idea. So I don't really have as much of a problem with them, but I do kind of want to take this opportunity to talk about MAGA communism. The underlying idea of wanting to bring the proletariat, which often supports MAGA, often is in industrial jobs, farming, trucking, etc. Wanting to bring those people class consciousness is a good idea.
Yeah, and that's all I've ever said. Whenever anyone asks me about MAGA communism, I always said the idea of engaging with Trump's base and Trump supporters about communism is a good thing. And that this cancel culture, that anyone who supports Trump is a Nazi, is a racist, and this idea that all leftists were all supposed to jump on the impeach Trump bandwagon, and that we're supposed to engage in cancel culture and hatred of conservatives, and we're supposed to, get triggered, and that we, and oh, you can't say you're against wars. That sounds like a MAGA conspiracy. That no, we have no loyalty to the Democratic Party, and we have no duty to protect the Democrats from MAGA. And in some ways, what MAGA says is slightly better than what the Democrats say. In practice, not so much, but in their rhetoric, they're at least appealing to people's anti-establishment sentiments. They're at least appealing to people's desire to end the wars. And so this idea that it's our job to make sure to protect the liberal order from those evil Republicans, bullshit, right? And that, so if you want to talk about MAGA communism, right? I wrote my book, and when people ask me, is this a MAGA communist book? I jokingly said this is probably the closest thing to a MAGA communist manifesto that ever came out. But if you read it, I am not endorsing Trump. And I never have. I've always said that, that the main issue is capitalism in a crisis. The main issue is the working class learning to assert its agenda and oppose the wars, and oppose the establishment. There's a division in the ruling class right now. Trump seems to be appealing to the lower levels of capital, and I talk about all of this, but I will admit, I'm just like Peter. I really don't like what has become of MAGA communism, right? I really don't, and I'm not going to say too much about that. I'll let Peter talk, and I might say a few other things, but we'll let Peter finish.
That is the least productive brand ever. MAGA and communism are two words that create this kind of reaction. I'm usually pretty straightforward about being a communist, but I usually don't say like, hi, my name is Peter Coffin. I'm a fucking communist. I have my kids' drawings up there. I have some art over there that you can't see. I don't just have like a ton of political theory up there. I've got like Steve Harvey's Jump. I don't hate Mr. Beast's videos. If you actually watch them, they're pretty good. There's some certain aesthetic stuff about it, usually at the start, that you got to get past. But once you're past that, they're pretty all right. This person is going to do this thing, and if they can, I'm going to give them $100,000. But wait, there's going to be a catch. Watch till the end and see what happens. Yeah,
I have no idea what he's talking about here. With all due respect, I don't know who Mr. Beast is. I don't know what he's talking about, but that's just because I'm not cool. But anyway, continue, Peter.
To ignore that part, but once you do, they're pretty fun actually. My point is that MAGA is an extreme partisan brand that pisses people off, just like communism. And I'm not saying the kind of communism I'm pushing, but just the word communism, the brand communism. It does the same thing. People hate communism.
Yeah, MAGA communism, and I said this too, is like the worst marketing strategy ever. If anyone's MAGA, if you walk to them and say, I'm a communist, they're going to be like, shut the fuck up. If anyone's communist and you walk up to them and say, hey, I'm MAGA, they're going to be like, shut the fuck up. Right? And I remember when I first heard about MAGA communism, I was just like, really? I mean, I like the idea of engaging with people that are anti-establishment, people that might support Donald Trump against the establishment about communism, but you're going to call it MAGA. You do realize that you're like, I mean, yeah, I've been with Peter on that from the beginning. It is the worst marketing conception. Anybody who's MAGA is going to hate communists. Anyone who's communist is going to hate MAGA. So it is basically you walk up to people and alienate yourself from both demographics.
In the same way they hate MAGA. Because in their eyes, it's an extreme political brand. So it's two very extreme political brands that both have extremely large hate followings and tiny slices of people that will tolerate both of those. In other words, it's a real, I am very unique brand to be a MAGA communist.
Oh. Like something that somebody invented because they wanted to build a social media brand with an exclusive following and market themselves and not build a real mass movement and take power, but instead build a social media brand.
Rather than creating similarity, MAGA communism does the exact same thing that LGBTQ does, which is it draws lines, it draws separation, it draws comparison. Rather than form one coherent thing, it instead takes multiple things and just acts like they're one thing.
Yes, it creates a very, 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 very unique brand, and it breaks people down into different groups. He's exactly right here, right? I mean, the LGBT politics that we've seen. I'm all for LGBT rights. People can be trans if they want to be trans. People can be gay if they want to be gay. You know, but the LGBT politics, and it creates a unique brand, and it separates people from each other. You have this unique, special identity that only a few people can understand. Yeah, and that's not what we need. That's great for selling shit and selling your channel and telling people to listen to you and nobody else, and that you are their savior on social media. That's great. But if you're actually going to build a movement to try and, like, you know, stop the New World War and stop the danger of World War III, not smart.
It's actually a very individualist way of looking at things. And ultimately, MAGA communists seem more obsessed with the Gramscian culture war bullshit than materialism of any kind anyways. So who really gives a shit?
Yes. The whole reason I became a communist and the whole reason I started calling out the woke left is because I don't want to talk about gay marriage. I don't want to talk about transgender bathrooms. I don't want to talk about, you know, who's a racist this week and who's a sexist this week and what celebrity used a naughty word. And MAGA communism has degenerated. It didn't start this way. It started better, but it has basically degenerated into a group of people who talk about the exact same shit as the woke left. They're just on the other side. And how is that productive, right? So it's like the woke left are all talking about transgender bathrooms and how if you don't support transgender bathrooms, you're a Nazi and you're a racist, and North Korea is actually like a Nazi country. And so then we have all these people that are MAGA communists. They're like, I hate trans people. They're all a bunch of faggots. Right. It's like, how is that helpful? The whole reason I broke with the synthetic left and I started doing this channel, all of it was about, I want to talk about economics. I want to talk about imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. I want to talk about the need to oppose their wars. I need to talk about overproduction and the tendency of the falling rate of profits. I want to talk about class struggle. I want to talk about anti-imperialism. That's what I wanted to talk about. And there's a whole milieu of people that took what I said about why the left has lost its mind and gone off course, and they turned it into, we'll sound just like them. We're just going to be on the other side. Right? And it's weird because I was immediately accused of that by all the woke people. And I said, no, I'm not. I said, I was in the same party as Leslie Feinberg, right? There are trans people in CPI. We never took a stand against LGBT. We never took a stand against gay marriage or abortion. There are members of the group that are opposed to that, and they're welcome. And there's people, there's people in the group that are in favor of those things, and they're welcome. And I have always said I became a communist not to fight a culture war against conservatives, but to oppose imperialism and to build up working class solidarity. And that internationally, communism is much more conservative, and that some of this social liberalism obsession is very alienating to working class people in general. That's all I ever said. And immediately, videos with hundreds of thousands of views got created, pointing fingers at me, saying that I want to murder all trans people and I'm a white supremacist and all this awful stuff, right? And that was all pointed at me, and I didn't sound like that. And then out of the blue, out of the blue, these people appeared that were doing exactly what I was accused of.
Am I talking about this because it relates hard to this? Green Day is just signaling. They're telling their audience who they want to be their fans. I don't know if they know they're doing this. They probably do to some extent because they probably don't want MAGA fans. But at the same time, they probably don't realize really what they're doing. They probably don't realize they're marketing. And the people who are angry about them saying that also probably don't realize that they're marketing. Green Day is doing fandom maintenance so that there is an other to rail against. MAGA doing the same thing. It's all about, like, shibboleths and brands and what's acceptable with my group that isn't in yours. It's separation. We have all of these fandoms and groups that feel like togetherness, but they are really built on the idea of creating a difference between yourself and someone else. Even the combining of the extremes like MAGA communism is ultimately about carving out an extremely unique, hey, I'm both MAGA and communist thing that almost no one is. And this is where you can really see how marketing, how PR, how Edward Bernays' methodology of spreading the word has really taken over. I talked about this in my documentary called Marks for Sale. Go watch that after this. But the unique selling point is the primary thing that people are trying to put out there about themselves. The thing that separates what I'm doing from what all the other people are doing. You got to define it and put it front and center so everybody sees that first and sticks around. And what I'm wanting to talk about here is how us as a society moving to the next stage of production specifically, the way that material resources and needs are produced and appropriated, the relationships of power. If we want to change any of that stuff, we have to stop doing that, the unique selling point, the finding how we are separate from them. And that's going to...
He's right. He's absolutely right. Right? Again, I would be much more successful if I was just a brand builder. If I was just a brand builder, if I was just focused on getting people to watch me, I would never take any risks. I would never work with people and make myself vulnerable. I would never, but I actually want to build a mass movement. I want to build an organization that actually gets shit done. And we did a pretty damn good job in the year 2023. And, a lot of people don't even know what that is like. They don't even understand that this isn't just a big social media game, right? But if you are going to build an in real life movement, you have to work with people. You have to work with people with whom you disagree. You have to find common ground, people you can work with on one issue that you might not be able to work with on another issue. You have to be able to deal with people who make mistakes, who disagree with you. I mean, in real life is not about convincing people you are extra special and unique and there's no one else like you. That's not what real life is like. The real world, the masses of the people are the makers of history. The masses of people in their millions are the makers of history. And they do that by finding common ground.
It's going to be tough because I've been saying pretty similar shit about this for over a decade now, and people just seem to think that I'm driven by personal vendetta and anger. It's because they're locked into that mindset and they're viewing what I'm saying through the lens of I'm declaring my unique selling point so that others understand why I'm different and worthy of being watched. But it's actually just me making a very simple request. Stop separating yourself from other people using words, language, aesthetic, etc., and start trying to find what you have in common with someone else. And no.
Imagine that, right? If somebody comes along and says what you're saying, try to find a way you can collaborate with them, not make them your enemy, right? If somebody comes along and agrees with you on a point, find a way that the two of you can both benefit. Don't feel like you have to destroy the other person's reputation in order to preserve the spotlight for yourself. I mean, it's really, really, I mean, the alienation and the individualism of capitalism has really done a number on communist movements. And I mean, I could go on about that all day long if I wanted to, and I'm not going to, but it's like, if you work with me, I want you to succeed. And I do, right? If you work with the Center for Political Innovation, I want you to make great YouTube videos. I want you to write good books and articles. I want you to give good speeches. It doesn't take anything away from me for you to do that, right? And this attitude that we're all just, it's all just an ego trip, right? That's because we're not actually winning. We're in a period where no one thinks we can actually win. And so it's just a contest of who can analyze and produce the best art criticizing it. Well, no, I want to actually win. I want to actually build an organization. I want to actually win.
Oh, that doesn't mean you have to become a bigot, but it does mean you have to remember that bigots are people and they think the things that they think for a reason. Even if it's not a good reason, there is a reason. If you start thinking of them as people with lives, wants, needs, you can start seeing how the idea of bigotry actually conflicts with their wants and needs. Maybe someday you can point that out to them. Maybe someday you won't be able to. I don't know. But I can tell you that all of the difference finding, the unique selling point identification, the separation perfected, if you continue engaging in that, nothing will change. And that doesn't mean just combine two, because all that does is create a really small subsection of people that think that they're better than everybody else because they've combined those two things. Am I talking about MAGA communists, or am I talking about LGBTQ? Oh, you'll never know. Like and subscribe. Thank you very much.
That was Peter, and that was a great response. And look, folks, I realize the world is not the world I grew up in. Okay, the world that I live in now, I live in New York City. I'm here in Brooklyn, right? I'm here in Brooklyn. The world that I live in as a 36-year-old man is not the world that I grew up in when I was 14. Okay. And so I want to keep that in mind. I realize that nowadays LGBT politics grows on trees, that nowadays practically every high school that ever existed has an LGBT club or something, and that, gay marriage has been legalized by the Supreme Court. And I realize that, okay? And I realize that LGBT politics are used to attack countries, right? And that the NGO apparatus, they fund gay rights protests in Russia and Iran and other places to try and set the stage for regime change politics. And so I realize that. But that said, with all of the anti-gay feelings and all the disgust with the corporatized LGBT culture, bullying is never a good thing, right? It's never a good thing. It is never a good thing to bully people because of who they're sexually attracted to, whether you think it's right or wrong and all of that. It's never a good thing, right? And, it's one thing to say, I as a Muslim, I as an Orthodox Jew, I as a Christian don't agree with that. I can respect that. But if you're sitting there and you're calling people faggots, right? Everyone's a faggot, right? If you're advocating hate crimes and punching people, I don't respect that at all, right? And nobody who is a conservative, who is genuinely a conservative, should. There is a difference between people that take a religious conservative stance and people that are just adolescents trying to wave their dicks around. Right. And I have very, very little tolerance for adolescents waving their dicks around. If you don't agree, right? Maybe you're one of the old school communists who thinks that homosexuality is bourgeois decadence or something, right? I think live and let live. I think that's between you. That's a journey that everyone has to go on, and that your sex life is none of my fucking business, and that your life is your own personal business. That's what I think. CPI, our position has always been your life is your life. It's none of our business. That's always been our position. But if you take a conservative stance, and that's your business, I respect your right to do that. But if you are calling people faggots, if you are talking about beating people up, if you are, I remember being in locker rooms and I would hear, and I mean, I tell people this and people say, you have to be making this up. I'm not making this up. I'm only 36 years old. I remember being in the locker rooms and hearing guys talk about, if I ever meet a gay person, well, I'm going to murder them. And then, oh yeah, well, if I ever meet a gay person, I'm going to beat them up first and then murder them. And being in the locker room changing while I hear other men one-upping each other in the brutal hate crimes they would commit against LGBT people. That used to be the atmosphere. That used to be like a required aspect of being an adolescent male, is that it was your job to tell everyone how much you wanted to kill people whose sexuality was non-conforming. That's so fucked up. That is so fucked up, and it's so wrong, right? And if you think that that is okay, or that's an aesthetic that we should go for, or that's something we should appeal to, or you're dead wrong, right? That is shallow, ignorant, childish behavior that has no place in any serious religious, political organization, religious, political, economic, social, or whatever. If I walk into a room and I hear people talking like that, right? They're calling people nasty names. I don't want to be in that room. I don't want to be in that room. And you should have the same thing. If you are a serious political person, you should realize that blatant bigotry and hate for people, not based on, you know, not based on, again, not based on any political position, but just based on people who they are, that's not okay. It's not okay, right? It's just not okay. And no civilized person supports that. You can take a religious stance and say, I am against it for this reasons. You can even say that you feel it shouldn't be legal, and I will disagree with you. I think that everyone has the right to live their life however they want to. But if you are sitting there and doing this adolescent male childish, oh, so-and-so's a faggot. Oh, yeah, such a big queer. I'm going to punch him in the face, man. Well, shut up, right? And that's the problem is that, and this is just one thing I'll just throw out. And this is my last thought in response to Peter Coffin's video. Just kind of winging it tonight. I probably could have said a lot more about Green Day, but I just kind of winged it. I probably could say a lot more about emo and punk and all kinds of things, but this is where I'm at tonight. We've been going for about an hour and 25 minutes, and pretty soon I'm going to start answering questions. But when I think about Green Day, and when I think about what was I going to say? Now I even forget what I was going to say. I was actually going to make a big point. Now I don't remember what that point was, but it'll come back to me. But I guess. Oh, here's the point. Here's the point. Now it came back to me. You should be listening. Right now, here I am telling you who you should be listening to. Right. Well, I'll be honest here. Right. Doesn't have to be me. Right. I'm not saying I'm the best. Right. Maybe I'm not. Maybe you know everything I'm about to say or everything I say on here. But generally, you should listen to somebody who makes you smarter. Right. And if you are a content creator, if you are a YouTube streamer, if you are a filmmaker, if you are a musician, if you are an artist, if you're a painter, if you're a playwright or a poet, your job with your art, whatever that art is to make your audience better, to make them smarter, to make them have more empathy, to make them think about things in a way they haven't thought of before. Your audience should walk away from your content better than they were before. That's just basic. And anybody who's not doing that, right? Anyone who's not doing that is not helping you. You're not getting better by watching the content. People who, instead of trying to make you better, pander to what they think your worst points are not helping you. And that goes for any form of art, right? Porn, right? Nobody thinks that porn is high art, right? I'm not taking a stance on the issue of pornography, right? I'm just telling you that no one thinks porn is art because porn is not making you better. Porn is trying to get you off. It's trying to turn you on, right? It's trying to appeal to your animalistic sexual desire. And that's all it's doing. That's it. Right? Porn is not making you smarter. Porn is not making you more thoughtful. It's not helping you be more empathetic. It's actually doing the opposite. Porn is just appealing to your basic animalistic desire. And that's why women, the feminist movement is very critical of porn because, some of the more negative aspects of sex in our society are amped up by pornography, right? The degradation of women and things that are already negative in the culture get kind of amped up in pornography because it's just trying to titillate you, right? And the difference between pornography and art is that pornography just appeals to your instincts and doesn't try to make you better. It actually kind of makes you worse. Whereas art, in some way or other, is trying to make you better. And it doesn't have to be sexual to be porn. There's rage porn, hate porn, stupid porn, right? But I consider things to be pornography. I consider them to be pornography if they are not making you better in any way, And if they're just kind of attaching on to what the content creator thinks are your negative instincts and monetizing that and saying, all right, how do I get them to keep coming back and paying me more money by appealing to whatever that is? And anybody who's doing that is not doing you a favor, right? If somebody is thinking, okay, what are the negative aspects of whoever might watch me? Are they angry? Are they hateful? Are they bigoted? Are they self-hating? Do they have lack of self-confidence? Whatever it is. And they're appealing to that. And they're dumbing down their content, and they're doing everything they can to just pander to your worst instincts so they can make a buck. That's not art. That's porn. Right? And somebody who's making porn on the internet is not doing you any favors. And I would encourage you that if you want to get smarter, if you want to become a better person, if you want to have a better life, if you want to gain more insights, if you want to have a life where you relate to people in a better way, I would avoid consuming anything that seems like porn. And I would work hard to try and consume things that in whatever way make you smarter or better. Sometimes you need stuff that just lets you vent. I get angry on these streams all the time. I yell and scream, but I try to teach you something at the same time. Right? We get emotional on these streams, but I try to teach you something. Right? Emotions are important. Feelings are important. But if art is not making you better, it's just appealing to your more base instincts. It's just pandering to what the producer thinks you already believe in your lower instincts. It's not good for you to consume it. I'll just be honest. It's just not good for you to consume it. That doesn't mean, you never do. Doesn't mean, that if you do, you're a bad person no, it just means that you're not helping yourself. And that I would try to give priority in what you read, what you listen to, what you watch on television, to things that make you better, not things that make you dumber, and not things that appeal to what the creator thinks is dumb about you, right? I love my audience. And I've said that many times, and I'm blatantly honest with all of you, right? Not that there aren't trolls in the chat sometimes, but for the most part, I love my audience. I really do. I love my audience. And I want you to come away from any book I write or any speech I give or any stream I do. I want you to come away smarter, better. I want to make you better with my art. And if somebody is coming at you with a different agenda, and they want to make you dumber with their art, they see you as a sucker to give them money, that's not good. That's not good. So I guess that's my point. That's my last point. But anyway, Happy New Year, everybody. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's do the roll call. And I've got, a number of super chats to answer. So that's great, but keep them rolling in. Names and locations. Mark Jones in Utica, New York. Jenny Lynn says, don't be a sucker. All right. Good stream, Caleb, says Rodolfo. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year. David in Vietnam. Cleveland Pirate Alex. Nate is out of town. Finn in Duluth. Patch in Arizona. Names and locations. Mima in California. Went surfing in Hawaii, says Chairman Robert. Surf's up, dude. Vietnam is cool. Whoa. Oh, hold up. I missed my man Tyler. Tyler was doing a great stream earlier tonight, reading from the CPI manual. Go and check that out. Good stuff. Rodolfo in Oregon. Rupert Fellows in England. Philip Blair in Vietnam. Colin in Greensboro. Right. Steve in Boston. Alex in Brazil. Chris in San Diego. Kay in New Orleans. Welcome, Kay. Emilio in California. Welcome, Emilio. 190 plus watching. Steve and Ann in Ringgold, Georgia. Welcome. Happy New Year from Idaho, says Sarah Jackman. Well, welcome, Sarah. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. Washington State, Philip Blair. There we go. Brad in Beechwood, Ohio at the mall. There you go. Beechwood, Ohio at the mall. Brendo in Northern California. Bob Troy in New York. Moonlight Beach, California. M. Cupertino in California. Zach Brunch in Richmond, Virginia. Happy New Year from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Balthazar in Oakland. Welcome, Balthazar. Names and locations. Bendigo, Australia. David Fox. Joe in New Jersey, home of the revolution. Feliz Año Nuevo, comrade. Happy New Year in Spanish. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yeah. There we go. There we go. There we go. Yes. There we go. All right. Briggy in Pennsylvania. Briggy does great work. Lovely Chicago. Welcome. Welcome, lovely. Mexicali, Mexico. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Bob Troy in New York. Welcome, Bob Troy. Zhao in New York City. Welcome, Zhao. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations, names and locations. Right? And you're on the list. We got plenty of super chats to go through, but that's great. That's great. We are having an action. January 7th. We are having an action. We are having an action on January 7th, Sunday. We're having some protests around the country to support Yemen. I think there's going to be something in Chicago, maybe something in Portland. So, we need to do something for Yemen. Nick in Tampa. Oh, Megan in Kansas City, Missouri. Welcome, Megan. Right? Oaxaca. Leaf Jacobson in Oaxaca. Dan in Pasadena. Right? I was with the anti-imperialist van that was at Rage Against the War Machine last year, formerly Bernie van, today at the Rose Parade with Palestine fans. We got a great response. That's neat. That's awesome. All right. Yeah, we're thinking of having a small, we're having rallies. Chicago, I'm going to do one in New York. So if you're available, please let me know. This is our call that we wrote for rallies to support Yemen. The Houthis actually gave a press conference. I was going to put the Houthi press conference on. This is the press conference the Houthis gave about the U.S. attack on them. So here we go.
عن القوات المسلحة اليمنية بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال تعالى أذن للذين يقاتلون بأنهم ظلموا وإن الله على نصرهم لقدير صدق الله العظيم. وبينما كانت القوات البحرية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية تمارس مهامها الاعتيادية الرسمية في ترسيخ الأمن والاستقرار وحماية الملاحة البحرية إضافة إلى أداء واجبها الإنساني والأخلاقي الذي أعلنه اليمن في منع السفن الإسرائيلية أو المتجهة إلى موانئ فلسطين المحتلة من المرور عبر البحر الأحمر تضامنا وإسنادا للشعب الفلسطيني. أقدمت قوات العدو الأمريكي على الاعتداء على 3 زوارق تابعة للقوات البحرية اليمنية ما أدى إلى استشهاد وفقدان 10 أفراد من منتسبي القوات.
This guy doesn't, I will say the delivery is amazing. For somebody who's given a military press conference, can you imagine John Kirby or the Department of Defense of the United States talking this way? Holy crap. This guy's damn, he's just rattling off the news. Shit.
البحرية إن القوات المسلحة اليمنية وهي تزف في خضم معركة الإسناد لطوفان الأقصى هؤلاء الشهداء من أجل فلسطين تؤكد أن العدو الأمريكي يتحمل تبعات هذه الجريمة وتداعياتها وأن تحركاته العسكرية في البحر الأحمر لحماية السفن الإسرائيلية لن تمنع اليمن من تأدية واجبه الديني والأخلاقي والإنساني دعما ونصرة للمظلومين في فلسطين وغزة. كما نهيب ببقية الدول عدم الانخراط في المسلك الأمريكي الخطير لما سينتج عنه من تداعيات سلبية قد تؤثر تداعياتها على الجميع. وفي سياق آخر وبتوفيق الله نجحت القوات البحرية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية في تنفيذ عملية عسكرية استهدفت سفينة حاويات ميرسك هانغزو كانت متجهة إلى موانئ فلسطين المحتلة، وذلك بصواريخ بحرية مناسبة. وقد جاءت عملية الاستهداف بعد رفض طاقم السفينة الاستجابة للنداءات التحذيرية للقوات البحرية اليمنية. إن القوات المسلحة اليمنية تؤكد على ما جاء في بياناتها السابقة بشأن منع مرور السفن الإسرائيلية كافة أو المتجهة إلى موانئ فلسطين المحتلة، مع حرصها الكامل على حركة الملاحة البحرية إلى كل الوجهات باستثناء الكيان الإسرائيلي. إن القوات المسلحة اليمنية تجدد نصحها للدول كافة بعدم الانجرار مع مخططات الأمريكي الهادفة إلى إشعال الصراع في البحر الأحمر، وأنها لن تتردد في التصدي لأي عدوان ضد بلدنا وشعبنا. إن القوات المسلحة اليمنية تهيب بأبناء شعبنا اليمني العظيم وجميع أحرار أمتنا العربية والإسلامية أن يكونوا على يقظة كبيرة والاستعداد للخيارات كافة في سبيل مواجهة التصعيد الأمريكي الداعم للكيان الصهيوني المجرم والمشجع له لارتكاب المزيد من الجرائم بحق إخواننا في غزة. صنعاء 18 من جماد الآخرة 1445 للهجرة، الموافق 31 من ديسمبر 2023، صادر عن القوات المسلحة اليمنية.
So there you go. Damn. What was that? I mean, that was, that speaks for itself. I mean, I just saw it. I was just like, shit. Wow. All right. There you go. Why are the elites creating forms of fake capital like natural assets companies? Well, this is a long-standing thing, right? Read about fictitious capital, right? Karl Marx wrote about the tendency of the creating of fictitious capital, right? Money that's made from other money, speculation, wealth that if it vanished, the actual material wealth of the nation wouldn't change in any way. What's the quote from? There's a quote from Karl Marx about fictitious capital. Let me put it on the screen, right? Fictitious capital. That's the term that Marx used. Right? Where did Marx said, through 1857, he was himself still a magnate of the money market and complained bitterly there were several large money capitalists in London who were strong enough to bring the entire money market into disorder at any given moment, and in this way fleece the smaller money dealers most shamelessly. They were supposed to be great sharks of this kind who could signify and intensify a difficult situation by selling 1 or 2 million pounds worth of consols and taking an equivalent sum of banknotes out of the market. The collaboration of big three banks in such a maneuver would suffice to turn pressure into a panic. The biggest capital power in London is, of course, the Bank of England, but its position as a semi-state institution makes it impossible for it to assert its dominion in such a brutal fashion. Nonetheless, it creates tokens of value that are not only means of circulation, but also additional forms, even if fictitious capital, to the nominal value of these fiduciary notes, and this extra capital yields it an extra profit. To the extent that the depreciation or increase in value of this paper is independent of the movement of actual capital that it represents, the wealth of the nation is just as great before as after its depreciation and increase in value, right? That's what he's referring to. The wealth of the nation is just as great as before as after its depreciation and increases in value, right? Fictitious capital. And this is an aspect of capitalism, as it creates fictitious capital, the definition of which Marx's definition of fictitious capital. Let me put that on the screen. It's wealth, money. The wealth of the nation is just as great before as after its depreciation or increase in value. And that's an aspect. I mean, look, I was just talking today. Why is the rent constantly going up in any major city? It's because houses aren't for living in here in the United States. Houses at this point, they just exist so that landlords and banks can make profits from them. And so at this point, the landlord buys the property, and then they wait for the market to go up, and then they sell it and they make money. No one has to actually live in the apartment for them to make money from it. David Fox has got the link. Right. And that, that there's so many examples of, speculative profits that are made, money made from other money, where no physical economy, no actual value is created. Could you please talk about the World Economics Forum's plans to restrict internet access and how we can fight it as explained by Whitney Webb? You're the best. Well, I thank you for calling me the best. I watched Whitney Webb's interview. It was good. I liked some of what she said. She has been all over the Epstein thing and Epstein's ties to Israeli intelligence. And, she does great interviews. I like Whitney Webb in a lot of ways. The World Economic Forum, they are constantly dreaming up more sinister schemes to manage capitalism. They represent that managerial wing of the bourgeoisie. The Eastern establishment, the Anglo-American establishment. Carol Quigley, the mentor of Bill Clinton, wrote about them. Alex Jones, I was listening to Alex Jones when he was describing who the World Economic Forum are, and it sounded like he was talking about me. I mean, he was talking about the stuff that I talk about. I mean, I'm sure he just has read the same sources that I've read. There is a wing of the American power structure, of the Western imperialist power structure, I should say, tied in with Britain, tied in with New England and the United States, that is just focused on stabilizing capitalism and is constantly dreaming up different kind of elaborate dystopian schemes for stabilizing capitalism. And part of that is, they actually, I believe, did pass into legislation the kill switch, right? Did that pass? I believe the kill switch, right? They can turn off the internet. The kill switch no, that's a ban. Come on. I Googled kill switch and it brings me a band. It's the internet kill switch. I believe they did pass it, right? The internet kill switch, right? Internet kill switch, right? It hasn't been passed yet. Okay. But during the Egyptian Revolution of 2011, Mubarak turned off the internet, right? And that there's been a long time amount of talk in the United States among the elite about, if there was a national security crisis of some kind, if there was a rebellion going on, they would turn the internet off. And they've openly talked about this, about the need. There's been legislation proposed about how the internet kill switch would work. And then there's also there's the whole net neutrality thing where they want to, they don't want to give you the whole internet, right? They want to you get some parts of the internet, you have limited, there's different proposals they have. They don't like the widespread freedom of information that the internet gives you, right? They don't like the fact that you can watch me on YouTube just as easily as you can watch somebody else, right? They don't like that. And they want to make it so that, they have an internet for everybody that is censored and limited. And World Economic Forum, the global internet kill switch, there you go, right? The idea that and of course, and this is why the woke people and the people that think it's our duty to defend the Democrats are so wrong, right? Plenty of the woke people think that's probably a great idea because the internet spreads conspiracy theories that makes people, oppose Joe Biden and like think that Russia is not evil and think that like the USA, invading Syria would be a bad thing. It's like there's some of these people that are liberals, the bulk of them. I mean, it used to be liberals were the ones who questioned the establishment narratives. But increasingly liberals are just the biggest defenders of them. The biggest defenders of the establishment narratives, and they view people who question them as the most dangerous, right? As they're dangerous fascists. And that's why, when you talk about MAGA communism, MAGA, to call yourself MAGA in our time is to be a dissident. And I want to talk to dissidents. I don't want to talk to conformists. But does that mean that it's complicated, but yeah, I mean, I haven't seen her latest thing. I did see some of a big chunk of her very good interview with Jimmy Dore. Whitney Webb's interview with Jimmy Dore was amazing. It was very good. So there you go. So what happened to Kamala Harris's father? Well, he lives in Jamaica, and he wrote an essay, Reflections of a Jamaican Father. And that was like his statement. That was like all he could say. And if you read it, and I quote it extensively in my book, and he's pretty old. I mean, the guy's not young. Donald Harris is not a young man. But when Kamala Harris was running for president, he gave his statement denouncing her campaign, calling it a travesty of identity politics. And then he wrote like a 10-page essay. He wrote a 10-page essay that he composed. In that essay, he basically said that, he dropped some hints. He didn't say exactly. And I quote the essay because it's very carefully worded. He drops some hints. Let me just put it that way. He drops some hints about why, why he and Kamala are not on good terms. And he talks about Kamala Harris's grandmother, who was in the Labor Party, and was a female activist. And he talks about Kamala as a child and his memories of her running, and he's speaking very vaguely, and I'm sure he's been threatened. I mean, the fact that he hasn't given any interviews or anything, he gave his one interview where he denounced her for the marijuana comment, right? What happened was Kamala Harris was running for president. They asked her if she'd ever tried marijuana, and she said, "Half my family's from Jamaica. What do you think?" Boom. Boom. And he took great offense to that. And in his essay, he talked about how the stereotype of a Jamaican as a lazy thrill seeker, a lazy person who smokes pot and uses pot, he didn't like it. And then he talked about how there was an ugly custody battle. Kamala Harris says in her autobiography, the only things her parents fought about in their divorce were the books. And actually, no, according to Kamala Harris's father, Donald Harris, there was an ugly custody battle. And the fact that he was black, he was a black man from the Caribbean, was used against him. And the stereotype of Caribbean men as not good fathers was used against him. And he resents that. And that he basically, when the divorce happened, he lost the ability to have a relationship with his daughter. Both of them. Kamala and Shmila, right? He lost the ability to have a relationship with them. And then he writes about how amazing both of their grandmothers were, their maternal grandmothers were. And he describes their grandmothers. That was interesting. He describes her great grandmother and his grandmother, or his mother, who is Kamala's grandmother, and his grandmother, which is her great grandmother. And he talks about Kamala running up a hill and how he filmed it with his little camera and the memories he has of taking Kamala around Jamaica. It's very eerie. You just have to read my book, right? Because he leaves a few hints. He can't say what the issue is, right? But he basically says, I didn't get the right to see my daughter. They played up this stereotype of Jamaicans as being potheads and being lazy. And because of that, you have to read it, right? You have to read it because it's very carefully worded, and that's all he said. And you could be sure he would be giving interviews right now. I met somebody who knows him. And that person basically told me he's not giving interviews. Let me just put it that way. There's somebody that I know who knows him. Or I should say I knew. I mean, I'm not in touch with him regularly. But I was friendly with somebody who is friends with Donald Harris. I'm not friendly. I don't talk to this person regularly anymore. I used to see them regularly. I don't. Somebody I used to know who was a friend and coworker of Donald Harris. And he, I basically said to him, is Donald available for any interviews or anything? And I was basically told, no, he's not doing that. And I mean, look, I'm sure he's been talked to, right? Anybody would love to talk to Donald. Fox News would love to sit down with him. At the time he gave his statement denouncing Kamala, that was huge. That got a huge amount of press, and he shut up. He completely shut up. And Kamala Harris, he doesn't exist as far as she's concerned. So I am very, very confident that he's not giving interviews. Basically, what I was told is he's not available. And I respect that, honestly, and to be fair, look, I'm not the vice president of the United States. I'm not, right. And I'm not, I'm not the, potentially the president of the United States. Look, Kamala Harris is dangerous. She is psychologically so dangerous and evil. And, so that I don't just end up repeating myself, I'll show you all a clip from Peter Coffin's great film where I talk about this. Like, the evil of Kamala Harris is an unavoidable thing. We're talking about, this is a woman who could drop atomic bombs on civilians. This is a woman who could, torture your family and laugh about it, right? This is a woman who almost killed an innocent man and sent him to the electric chair. You're dealing with a high level of evil. So the fact that I get personal and I talk about her family and I talk about her relationship with her parents, and I talk about the trauma that she potentially has endured and what it is, right? Because we don't know exactly, there's different rumors about what happened when she was living in Quebec and stuff like that, and that, look, there were some aspects of the Kamala Harris story I chose not to touch in my book. Right. I'll be honest with you. There were some aspects of the story that I could have touched and I didn't, because if I had gone there, I would have just looked like an asshole. But yeah, quick reminder for those of you who haven't read my book or whatever, this is just kind of a everything you need to know video about our amazing vice president and why she's so fucking dangerous. Right. This is from the great documentary Peter Coffin made.
To frame herself as Miss Black Lives Matter, when in reality, Kamala Harris was the queen of mass incarceration.
Kevin Cooper was hours away from receiving lethal injection. Hours away from it. His lawyers asked that DNA evidence be acquired in order to make sure he was actually guilty of the crime. Kamala Harris's office tried to prevent DNA evidence from being acquired. They wanted Kevin Cooper to be executed, but the governor of California disagreed. They acquired DNA evidence, and the execution was stopped. The New York Times tells us that she feels really bad about it, for whatever that means. And people can also recall that while she was head of the California State Attorney General's office, over 1,000 people were locked up for smoking marijuana. She presided over jailing a lot of people. And on top of that, the drug labs in the state of California that were being used by the police were turning up false positive results. And yet Kamala Harris's office did not tell the defense attorneys or the judges about this. They knew that the drug labs were turning over false positives, and people went to prison because her office concealed that their drug labs were turning up false positives. And another thing about Kamala Harris, I don't know if people saw, but there's a video of Kamala Harris where she's bragging about how she jailed the parents of children who were truant from school.
I would not be standing here were it not for the education I received. And I know many of us will say the same thing. And I believe a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime. So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco. And frankly, my staff went bananas. They were very concerned because we didn't know at the time whether I was going to have an opponent in my re-election race. But I said, look, I'm done. This is a serious issue, and I've got a little political capital, and I'm going to spend some of it.
Have you seen the clip? And she gets up there and it's the same kind of thing. She's giggling. Yes, I had the idea that we could lock up parents who are truant from school. You know, I wouldn't be anywhere in my life if it weren't for my education. And so not giving a child their education is a crime. And so I jailed parents, and she's giggling about it. It's just so great. And you know, I see so much in US media. They like to trivialize incarceration. There's so many shows on Netflix and all of that where it ends towards the end where someone goes to jail, but it's part of the happy ending. It's okay. And they don't seem to realize what that means. You know, when one member of a family, when a father or a mother goes to prison, or a brother or a sister, it hurts the entire family. And when Kamala Harris is up there giggling about, oh, you know, I locked up these parents because their kids weren't in school. You know, yeah, kids need to be in school. If kids aren't getting to school, it's a problem. But the worst thing you could do is then throw their parents in jail. That's not going to help the situation in any conceivable way. But when she's joking about it, and she's laughing about it, Kamala Harris, she says, what did she say? She said, well, I wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for my education. It's about her. The big line when she was calling out Joe Biden, when she was trying to contend with Joe Biden in the presidential election, what did she shout at Joe Biden? She shouted, that little girl was me!
You know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
And then her campaign started churning out T-shirts with the face of 10-year-old Kamala Harris on them. Do you remember this? Yes. It's almost like she wants us to vote for her because she was once a 10-year-old child. I mean, that's what it sounds like. What's particularly interesting is, you know, you remember when Barack Obama was running for president. We knew everything about Barack Obama. We knew all about Barack Obama's pastor. We knew about Barack Obama's father from Kenya. We knew the school he went to in Indonesia. But Kamala Harris, barely anybody knows anything about Kamala Harris. Well, Kamala Harris's mother, who's now deceased, was from India, was a cancer researcher. And Kamala Harris's father, Donald Harris, was a Marxist economist, and is a Marxist economist, a professor at Stanford University. He was an advisor to the government of Michael Manley in Jamaica, and he and Kamala are estranged from one another. He did not attend Kamala's inauguration as vice president. They're not on good speaking terms. But the more you look at it, it's very clear that Kamala Harris sees herself as a victim. The way Kamala Harris speaks, the world has been unfair to her. And she blames Donald Harris for that to some degree or other. We don't know why. We also, there's rumors, we don't really know what happened when she was in Quebec. We just know she never talks about the years that she spent in Quebec. But Kamala Harris thinks that she is a victim. And she wants the whole world to know that that little girl was her. And she wants vengeance. And she wants to make people pay. And she wanted to make Kevin Cooper pay. And she wanted to make those parents pay. That's what leftism is if it's stripped of economics. If it's stripped of class struggle, if it's stripped of a desire to have the people rise up and control the means of production, if it's just anger, if it's just revenge, it's just a call for destruction, a call for rebellion, that's what Kamala Harris is. Kamala Harris, she's very much a guillotine meme. That's what she is. It's the glorification of punishment, a desire for revenge, a desire for destruction. And that if you look at the history of socialism around the world, the strength of socialism wasn't the guillotines, it wasn't the firing squads, it wasn't the persecution. That's not what people remember the strength of socialism being. They just did a poll. 75% of Russians say that the Soviet Union was the best time in their history, but they're not thinking that because of executions. This was from a PBS documentary. They interviewed a woman named Tatiana Fedorova.
Stalin set a task. Build this or build that. And thanks to the fact that people trusted him and this enthusiasm of young people, it was possible. Remember, this was a country where people were illiterate, lived in virtual darkness, wore birch bark shoes. Even now, I think it's like something out of a fairy tale. How was it possible at one of the most difficult times to raise these great construction sites? It was only possible through the unity of the people and the love of the people for their idol.
And the reason Stalin remains wildly popular in Russia, it's not because he executed people, it's because he mobilized them to build that country up from nothing. This was a country
He built some of the world's largest power plants. He wiped out illiteracy, and he built a modern industrial country. He raised millions of people up out of poverty. And then they fought off the Nazi invaders, and then they rebuilt the country again. And a few years later, they were the first country in outer space. And the strength of socialism was not that it punished people and that it persecuted people, but rather that it enabled people to go out and build and construct. I've said to many people, I'm not a socialist because I want to destroy America. I'm a socialist because I want to save America. And we have to save America from the horrors that are being unfolded by an irrational system where profits come before people. I want to save America. I want to build a better world. If all the apparatus they've created for destroying people, for imprisoning people, for breaking people psychologically, could be utilized to build and to construct, if popular power were put in control of the means of production and control of the state apparatus of the United States, we could build something very, very beautiful.
They want you to be mad at Russia and China instead of the looters that are sitting not very far from here off Wall Street, who are actively getting bailouts in the billions, who arguably even in the trillions, for their gambling debts. That's what we're here against, and that's why we're taking a stand for freedom of speech, because they're going after the Yahoo movement, and anyone who stands against the imperialists, because they know we're a real threat and that's rising. They know we authentically represent the American people. They know that the American people are ready for a change and ready for an end to the wars. And that's why they're cracking down on our First Amendment. They're cracking down on our Fourth Amendment. They're cracking down on all the civil liberties we know and love.
Yeah, that's from Peter Coffin's amazing film, Money and American Injustice, which you can find on the films section of our website. Peter does amazing work. These are amazingly well-made films. He really knows what he's doing, and it really gets our message across. Again, we're not trying to build a fandom. We're trying to build a real movement, right? So if you want to watch either of the two films Peter's made about CPI, they're right here on the CPI website under films. John Pilger. Wow, that man is a giant. I met John Pilger on 2 occasions, and it was a great honor, a really great honor. And I've seen many of his films over the years. His film about China, his film about Zimbabwe, and, take some time. Now that the man has passed on, he was very dedicated to the freedom of Julian Assange. Take some time and go watch some of the John Pilger films. This guy was a socialist. He was an anti-imperialist, and he was, against their system, and he was in solidarity with oppressed people around the world that were fighting for their freedom. He made some mistakes at the beginning of the color revolutions in Eastern Europe, but he realized he was wrong. People make mistakes, and that's fine. And he played an amazing dynamic role. Very working class, very progressive. When I met him, I told him that I had worked for Ramsey Clark. He knew Ramsey Clark, and he knew, anybody in the world who was doing peace activism and was anti-imperialist. He knew them. He knew everybody who did Latin America solidarity. He was definitely somebody. He wasn't just a filmmaker. He saw himself as making these films as part of a movement. He was an Australian anti-imperialist, and he saw himself as part of a revolutionary movement against imperialism. A great man, a communist, an anti-imperialist. I'm honored to have met him. I think I only met him once or maybe twice, but it was an honor to meet him. And I have a signed copy of one of his books. It was a gift from a friend, and I treasure it. And it's a shame he didn't live to see Julian Assange free. A great man, if there ever was one. A great Australian and a great anti-imperialist. Go and watch his film where he interviews Robert Mugabe. Go and watch his film, The Coming War on China. He's done so many great pieces. I look up to him in many, many, many ways. Many, many ways. John Pilger was a great man. All righty. Next question. Next question. Vargas in Brazil. Vargas was a Bonapartist figure. and a president of Brazil that passed a lot of reforms for workers' rights. He was a strong man in Brazil who built a lot of infrastructure. And, he's considered kind of a founding father in Brazil. Just kind of, he's like a hero of the country. But he was a strong man, anti-imperialist. But people say there was an element of like weird fascist. Yeah, I mean, it was, during the 1930s and 40s in Latin America, you had a layer of people that were not communists, but were also critical of the United States. And I guess Brazil isn't part of Latin America; it's South America, right? They speak Portuguese. But you had a layer of kind of Bonapartist figures who were, they represented that landed aristocracy, but they were between the indigenous population and the imperialists, and they kind of resented the American and the British imperialists. And because of that, they had to win the loyalty of the population at home to have their back against the American and the British imperialists. And some of them, were blatantly, exactly like Perón in Argentina. Some of them, unfortunately, did make positive statements about Hitler and stuff, but I don't think Vargas ever did. I think Vargas, he was just a Bonapartist to some degree or other. And, his legacy is mixed. But overall, he's seen as an ally of the labor movement in Brazil. He's seen as somebody at the Communist Party of Brazil, and others, they speak positively of his leadership. When I was at a labor conference in Brazil, they hailed, Vargas as a great founder of their country. They admired him. So, yeah. When I was in Brazil, I heard a lot of good things about Vargas. Among labor circles, working class circles, popular movements in Brazil, he's considered to be a great figure. All right. Remind me of the Borat sequel, where at the end of the movie, the message "vote or die" also has an obvious anti-MAGA message that contradicts the previous film. I have not seen that. I saw the first Borat movie. And Borat, is kind of vulgar propaganda. It's like, Borat himself, right, is supposed to be a stereotype of like a Central Asian Muslim, right? He's from Kazakhstan, and he's like stupid, right? And he's anti-Semitic, right? And he's walking around saying stupid anti-Semitic things. So it's like already a slur on like Muslims. It's a slur on Russians. It's a slur on Central Asians. It's a slur on Persians. It's already like playing up this idea that people from parts of the world that are not Western Europe are all a bunch of anti-Semitic buffoons, especially the Muslim parts. So it's already, it's kind of clever humor, but it's also nasty. But then what's the point of the Borat movie? He comes to America and he's acting like this anti-Semitic buffoon, and he gets Americans to reveal that they agree with him, right? That deep down, we Americans too, we're all a bunch of Borats. It's very elitist, ugly propaganda. And of course, that's why you need an Israel, because, deep down, all the people of Central Asia, all the people of the Middle East, all the Muslims, all the Russians, they all just want to kill the Jews. They're all just like Borat. And then deep down, we Americans, we're all just a bunch of bloodthirsty Borats also, right? And, the frat boys and we all just want to kill the Jews. And so you have to have an Israel. It's Zionist propaganda. And it's funny. It's clever, and it's clever stuff, where he pranks these people. And it's clever stuff, but the message is Zionist elitism, right? It's that deep down, we're all a bunch of, everyone who's not Jewish deep down is a anti-Semitic buffoon, right? And that's vile, hateful stuff, and so not a fan, right? And Zionism is not Judaism. And I agree, right? Judaism is a religion. It's been around thousands of years. You can read the Torah, right? But Sacha Baron Cohen, his films are Zionist. And his film about Gaddafi, it was horrendous. The film he made about Gaddafi, it had kind of a clever, like edgy leftist spin at the end. But his film, The Dictator, about Gaddafi, Gaddafi was a great, great person. And, the way he made that film, making, basically justifying the bombing and destruction of Libya. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. All right. The ruling class is smarter than we think. People like Bush don't kill civilians by mistake. These acts are quite planned and calculated. Yeah, I agree. Michael Parenti used to always talk about how, when they said, is Bush a failure? And it's like, well, he got a lot done as president. I don't think he's a failure, right? He's, he represented his class very, very, very effectively. And he got a lot done for the imperialists. not a failure by any means. He just, the policies he carried out were very bad for the people of the world. And he did cause some big problems for U.S. imperialism toward the end, driving the oil prices up, alienating the Muslim world, alienating the NATO folks. I've talked about that before, and that's something to understand. That the Obama pivot was part of the way Bush had taken things. The U.S. imperialists needed to move in a different direction. The neocon thing kind of got played out. Oh, I'm getting tired, folks. You guys are wearing me out. But that's good. That's good. Keep me talking. Get me talking. Happy New Year. The No Effects song reminded me of a popular song in Argentina called Sir Cabranza that criticized the Menem government to the point of wishing them death. Okay. Wow. I didn't know that. I will say there was a sketch on SNL that made fun of Trump supporters, and it reminded me exactly of Venezuelan TV and the way they characterized Chavez supporters. It was an SNL sketch, which I think I showed on a stream once, and then YouTube made me take the stream down or something. So I can't show it on here, but it was an SNL sketch that was supposed to be a skit of a Trump rally. And the way it portrayed the Trump supporters as stupid conspiracy people who admire, it was that's exactly how they portrayed Chavistas and supporters of Hugo Chavez. That's why the Stop Trump movement is no good. And I've never, there's nuance, people. We don't have to be MAGA communists and call everyone faggots and use nasty language on our streams to recognize that, that the Stop Trump movement is a bad thing, and that attacking MAGA is serving the ruling class. And, there's nuance to all of this. Again, I wrote a book. Go and read it. Go and read my book, or go listen, better yet, to Tyler's audiobook of it. Right? You can do that for free. You don't even have to pay for it. The great Tyler McConnell, our good friend, if you go to his YouTube channel, he made a great audio book of the book. So here, I'll link you his great audio book. You can listen to the audio book for free, so you don't even have to pay. So you'll want to learn where is America going? What's going on in the world today? Go and listen to the audio book of Where is America Going? My book, right here. Tyler's great audio book. You can learn all about Where is America Going? The audiobook version from Tyler. The playlist is right here. Tyler did a great job. So there you go. Or you can get a physical copy of the book, or you can listen to the audiobook. There you go. There you go. Right? There's a division in the ruling class. MAGA represents the beginning of something important. There you go. All righty. All righty. Keep fighting the good fight, Caleb. Hey, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. Doing my best. I will keep it up. Thank you. President Xi Jinping's New Year's speech is a class act. Government working for the best of its people. Well, let's put it on. Let's put it on. Xi Jinping, New Year's speech. Let's put it on. I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but let's put it on. All right. Here it is on Al Jazeera. Right. Everyone's making a big deal about how he said that there will be reunification. That's the only thing anyone's talking about. So let's get the whole thing, right? Everyone's just saying, oh my God, he said reunification with Taiwan, the end of the world. It's okay, but what was the whole speech, right? I'm trying to find the speech. I find all these clips of tiny parts of it. So let me go to CGTN. I bet it's on CGTN, right? They tend to have that kind of thing, right? All right. Is it here? The New Year's message. It's on CGTN, usually. Right? Where is his New Year's message? I want the official thing. I do not want an edit of it. I want to watch the full thing, the full New Year's message, right? So where is it? Right? Where is Xi Jinping's New Year's speech? I want to put the whole thing on. I don't want someone to tell me what it says. I want to watch the actual New Year's message. So where is it? Where is Xi Jinping's? Here we go. It's 12 minutes, folks. 12 minutes. But hey, what the heck? I'm a little tired, folks. My voice is fading, but hey, my audience, you sent a super chat. It's important to you. I ought to see it anyway. So I'm a little tired, but that's okay. We're going to listen to Xi Jinping, and we're going to watch more than just his comment on Taiwan because it was an important speech and he said way more than that. So we're waiting for it to process. We're going to watch Xi Jinping. There we go. There we go. All right. We're just waiting for it. Blackjack Pinocchio, we're waiting for it. And we'll watch Putin at some point, not tonight, but we'll watch it. It was a good speech. I did watch the Putin speech already. But yeah, we'll watch Xi Jinping also. It's 12 minutes, so it's a long speech, but that's okay, right? That's okay. We're going to put it on. It's almost done downloading, and I will put it on, and we will watch it, and that will be good. We will watch it, right? We will watch it. All good. All good. All right. It's almost ready. Almost ready. All right. Here is President Xi Jinping's 2024 New Year's address. All right. We're putting it on. I am so tired. My head is hurting, but that's okay. I am dedicated to my audience. Here we go. Here we go. All right. Here we go.
On New Year's Eve, Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered his 2024 New Year message via China Media Group and the Internet.
"同志们、朋友们、女士们、先生们，大家好！冬至阳生，岁回绿转。在这辞旧迎新的美好时刻，我在北京向大家致以新年的祝福。2023年，我们接续奋斗，砥砺前行，经历了风雨洗礼，看到了美丽风景，取得了沉甸甸的收获。大家记住了一年的不易，也对未来充满信心。这一年的步伐，我们走得很坚持。疫情防控平稳转段，我国经济持续回升向好，高质量发展扎实推进，现代化产业体系更加健全，一批高端化、智能化、绿色化新型支柱产业快速崛起，粮食生产20连丰，绿水青山成色更足，乡村振兴展现新气象，东北全面振兴谱写新篇，雄安新区拔节生长，长江经济带活力脉动，粤港澳大湾区勇立潮头。中国经济在风浪中强健了体魄，壮实了筋骨。这一年的步伐， 我们走得很有力量。经过久久围攻的磨砺，中国的创新动力、发展活力勃发奔涌。C919大飞机实现商飞，国产大型邮轮完成试航，神舟家族太空接力，奋斗者号极限深潜，国货潮牌广受欢迎，国产新手机一机难求，新能源汽车、锂电池、光伏产品给中国制造增添了新亮色。中国以自强不息的精神奋力攀登，到处都是日新月异的创造。这一年的步伐，我们走得很见神采。成都大运会、杭州亚运会精彩纷呈，体育健儿勇创佳绩，假日旅游人潮涌动，电影市场红红火火，村超村晚活力四射，低碳生活渐成风尚，温暖的生活气息，复苏的忙碌劲头，诠释了人们对美好幸福的追求，也展现了一个活力满满、热气腾腾的中国。这一年的步伐，我们走得很显底气。中国是一个伟大的国度，传承着伟大的文明。在这片辽阔的土地上，大漠孤烟，江南细雨，总让人思嗟千载，心驰神往。黄河九曲，长江奔流，总让人心潮澎湃，豪情满怀。良渚二里头的文明曙光，殷墟甲骨的文字传承，三星堆的文化瑰宝，国家版本馆的文脉更续，泱泱中华，历史何其悠久，文明何其博大。这是我们的自信之基，力量之源。中国不仅发展自己，也积极拥抱世界，担当大国责任。我们成功举办中国中亚峰会、第3届“一带一路”国际合作高峰论坛，一系列主场外交迎来5周宾朋。我也访问了一些国家，出席了一些国际会议，会晤了不少老朋友、新伙伴，分享中国主张，深化彼此共识。世事变迁，和平发展始终是主旋律，合作共赢始终是硬道理。前行路上，有风有雨是常态。一些企业面临经营压力，一些群众就业生活遇到困难，一些地方发生洪涝、台风、地震等自然灾害，这些我都牵挂在心。大家不惧风雨，守望相助，直面挑战，攻坚克难，我深受感动。 辛勤劳作的农民，埋头苦干的工人，敢闯敢拼的创业者，保家卫国的子弟兵，各行各业的人们都在挥洒汗水。每一个平凡的人都做出了不平凡的贡献。人民永远是我们战胜一切困难挑战的最大依靠。明年是新中国成立75周年，我们要坚定不移推进中国式现代化，完整、准确、全面贯彻新发展理念，加快构建新发展格局，推动高质量发展，统筹好发展和安全。要坚持稳中求进，以进促稳，先立后破，巩固和增强经济回升向好态势，实现经济行稳致远。要全面深化改革开放，进一步提振发展信心，增强经济活力，以更大力度办教育、新科技、育人才。要继续支持香港、澳门发挥自身优势，在更好融入国家发展大局中，保持长期繁荣稳定。祖国统一是历史必然，两岸同胞要携手同心，共享民族复兴的伟大荣光。我们的目标很宏伟，也很朴素，归根到底就是让老百姓过上更好的日子，孩子的抚养教育，年轻人的就业成才，老年人的就医养老，是家事，也是国事。大家要共同努力，把这些事办好。现在社会节奏很快，大家都很忙碌，工作生活压力都很大。我们要营造温暖和谐的社会氛围，拓展包容活跃的创新空间，创造便利舒适的生活条件，让大家心情愉快，人生出彩，梦想成真。当前世界上还有一些地方处在战火硝烟之中，中国人民深知和平的珍贵，我们愿同国际社会一道，以人类前途为怀，以人民福祉为念，推动构建人类命运共同体，建设更加美好的世界。此时此刻，夜色斑斓，万家灯火，让我们一起祝愿祖国繁荣昌盛，世界和平安宁。祝愿大家福暖四季，顺遂安康。谢谢大家。
Yeah, I mean, wow. His job as the president is to make sure the life for people in China gets better and the standard of living goes up. And he came forward and said, this is what I did this year to improve it. This is how we're doing. That's exactly what a New Year's speech should be about. That's tremendous. That was absolutely tremendous. I mean, that was, amazing. That's what real leadership goes. I wrote an article about Xi Jinping and the forgotten science of statecraft. That's real leadership. That's not being a politician. That's being a leader. right? He's the man at the top. He got the job done. He told us at the end of the year, this is what I did. This is how I'm delivering. This is what our projects are. He talked about the Saigon new area, which I talked about. I remember I did a segment on RT about that when it opened up. That's great. That's really, really great. I talk about this in the introduction to Jesus is a Socialist. I talk about that, Fidel Castro, in some of his letters, he openly called himself a Christian, and he met with the Pope and he met with clergy from the Russian Orthodox Church. And in his autobiography, he said that he considered himself to be a Christian in the way he sees the world. And he also said that he did publicly apologize for the way gay people were treated. A lot of people say that gays were put into labor camps in Cuba. It's not exactly true. What it was is in Cuba, when you get to be a certain age, you have the choice of going into the military or doing farm labor. And gay people were excluded from going into the military because they were gay. So were Jehovah's Witnesses. So were people that were anti-communist, that were deemed not trustworthy. They had to do farm labor. They were not given the option of going into the military. And there was a lot of bullying and degradation directed at the people that did farm labor because they were seen as not being manly enough to go into the military. And that was deeply wrong, right? And gay people were, people that were known to be gay were singled out and not allowed, and forced to be part of the work brigades that were not allowed to be part of the military. And so were Jehovah's Witnesses, and so were, pacifists, and so were anti-communists, but they were all treated pretty badly, and that was wrong. And Fidel Castro realized he's wrong, and now Cuba kind of leads the world in LGBT stuff. They even have gay marriage, which most socialist countries do not have. So that's an important story. Look, and people live and learn, and they change, and there you go. All right, folks, I'm at the end of my rope. I wish I could keep going. I'll be back tomorrow night. I'm still getting over some illness that I had, but that was a beautiful message from Xi Jinping. I want to thank the person who super chatted, because that was just a great message, a great way to end the stream. And I'm going to put on the closing music, but I'll be back probably tomorrow night. Why not, right? Why not? I'll be back tomorrow night. And looks like I'll be back tomorrow. And all right. All righty. I will be back tomorrow night. I think tomorrow, if not soon afterwards. But yeah, it's been fun. You guys are awesome. Be in touch. Surge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.